Retired Colonel David B. Desroches is professor at Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University, is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Colonel David, good to see you, and thank you very much for joining us at this hour. We'll begin with what Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says, and I will quote him. He says that this war will be long and difficult, and Israel is intensifying its aerial strikes and progressing to the next phase of operations. What do you think he means by next phase of the operations?
So what I think is that the Israelis are currently engaged in what we call shaping operations. They're trying to attrit Hamas's military capabilities, disrupt their command and control, make it difficult for them to move forces around the battlefield. When they have come to that, when they think they've achieved that goal, that's when I think they're going to move in on the ground and basically start dismantling Hamas's underground facilities. So I think we're in the second stage of what's likely to be a four-stage war.
Colonel David, Gaza remains under a communications blackout for a second day as aid groups, including the United Nations, say they are unable to contact teams on the ground. What impact could this have going forward if this is not dealt with now?
Well, you know, there's already a dire humanitarian situation in Hamas, which is effectively under siege. Strategically, this is probably a loss for Israel, whether Israel is responsible for the blackout or not. Most people will blame it on Israel. Most people around the world are holding Israel responsible for the dire humanitarian situation here. So anything that complicates that, I think, will strategically work against Israel. Tactically, however, there's probably, you know, most Hamas military communications is probably over directed landlines or runners. But there is some communications that probably goes on through the commercial network, so this will make that a little bit harder.
Let's talk about the hostage situation at this moment. The United States is still insisting that they want to talk to Israel so that they can halt their ground invasion. Hamas has not released any more hostages. They've only released 4 hostages. What do you think is at play here? How is this going to end eventually?
I don't think it's going to end well. So Hamas has 3 techniques they use to try to counter Israel's overwhelming technological advantages, particularly Israel's control of the air, observation and attack from the air. So the first is they disperse their military facilities among civilian infrastructure so that if Israel were to use artillery or airdrop bombs against Hamas military infrastructure, they'll also damage a lot of civilian infrastructure. And I think you know, that mingling of civilian and military targets is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of dead Palestinians. The second thing they do is they put stuff underground, which just militarily is hard to hit, hard to defeat. The third thing is the hostages. Every Israeli strike has to take into account the question of, you know, is this a place where hostages are being held? And I think that it is probable that the hostages are not being held in one location, that they are split up in multiple locations. Some of those locations are underground, and that is a restraint on Israeli operations.
Colonel David, finally, and I want your brief response to this one. There are countries that are getting involved into this war. We had the Turkish president Erdogan yesterday in a rally. His statements really angered Israel, and Israel is pulling out its diplomat from Turkey. What impact will this have going forward? Because some of these countries, we are talking about Arab countries, we are talking about West Asia here.
Yeah, well, I mean, Turkey under Erdogan is an unusual case. I think that the Israelis consider him to be, at best, that they can just get him to, you know, sit on the sidelines. So I don't think anybody's particularly surprised. It's true that as the war drags on, people tend to forget, you know, what caused the war, which was a Hamas-targeted attack against civilians. That is a clear war crime. And instead, Israel is being held responsible for the ongoing military operations to defeat Hamas, which I'm pretty convinced has scattered its military capabilities in civilian areas so that there will be civilian casualties, which Israel will then be blamed for. So I think in the long term, the longer this war runs on, it's more of a strategic drain on Israel, which is losing support in the international community and is also losing support in the United States, although the American leadership seems to remain steadfast.
All right, I've been talking to retired Colonel David B. Desroches, a professor at Near East South Asia Center for Strategic Studies, National Defense University. Colonel David, thank you for talking to us today.
Thank you. It's an honor.
WION is now available in your country. Download the app now and get all the news on the move.